Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking down UCF football. Brandon Wimbush on the roster, transfer from Notre Dame. We've got Jeff Sharon on the line from Black and Gold Banneret, SB Nation. One other thing, you mentioned the LSU effort, and maybe it looking, at least from your perspective, to be a closer performance on the field to LSU's performance than what we saw on the scoreboard. It was just a one-score game. So I'll let you know what I saw. And then, Jeff, you will take it away as being the expert on the UCF side. So I was watching 3 games at the same time. So we had 3 bowl games, and this is my biggest dilemma of the year and one of my favorite days of the year, but it drives me nuts when we've got 3 games on at the same time, when we can watch Louisiana Lafayette and Arkansas State play in an exclusive window 2 weeks earlier, that all the games are exclusive until we get to the best games and the best teams. And then we got to choose between, you know, the Kentuckys and Penn States and Michigans and Florida, whoever else was playing at the time, Iowa, Mississippi State. Yeah, the whole deal. So anyway, I was diverted. I didn't go back and watch every play of the game, but I had the game on. I'm watching 3 games at the same time. So I see an LSU team that my pro LSU take would be they were missing half their defense either before the game or during the game, lost. And that would be the basic excuse for the LSU Tigers, and some of that elite NFL talent, Greedy Williams being the headliner. On the UCF side, what I saw was dropped passes all over the place. Meaningful dropped passes, like 3rd and 12. I can picture one, a slant that would have dug them out of a hole, and they like a 3rd and 12, boom, right off the chest.
Yeah. There were at least 2 drop touchdown passes in that game. One of them would have been a 75-yard touchdown in the early part of the third quarter that would have changed the complexion of the game. It was a bizarre game. There were a lot of penalties. There were 26 combined penalties, very sloppy. And yet UCF was down 24-21 at the half, and they were getting the ball to start the third. And then they went 3 and out. I think that drop pass off of one guy's chest was the one you were talking about that would have extended the drive. Instead, they went 3 and out after getting the ball to start the second half. And then LSU goes down, scores a touchdown, and they're back up by double digits. UCF's defense, I thought, actually played fairly well in the game. And that in the second half, they did their job. They held LSU after that first drive in the third quarter. They held LSU to 3 field goals. And all of those field goals were inside 30 yards. So they clamped down at the goal line and gave the offense a chance to get back in it. Problem was UCF had some drop passes. They had some key penalties. They just could not convert third downs in that game. And yet, despite all of that, UCF had the ball in the final minute, down 1 possession with a chance to tie the game. So, and by the way, they were doing that. I know that the LSU people were saying, well, we were missing all of, how many guys on defense and still held you. Well, held us to what? The UCF still scored 32 points. Number one. Number 2, UCF did that with a backup quarterback, a redshirt freshman, and Darryl Mack making his 3rd career start. And number 3, you mean to tell me that all those other guys who were starting in those other guys' places were scrubs? I don't think so. Those are all 4- and 5-star guys who are going to be in the NFL in 3 to 4 years anyway. So the only difference, by the way, and the other difference is all those guys for LSU who were backups, they had all at least started at least 1 game earlier in the year. So it's not like they're throwing the little giants out there in place of a bunch of 5-stars. Those backup guys for LSU are pretty good too, but don't forget. So there's a lot of there was Nate Evans of UCF posted on his Snapchat. I think this is really telling. He posted on his Snapchat, someone from Alabama, it was postmarked Birmingham, Alabama, went through the trouble of printing out a picture of Nate Evans after the 93-yard interception return by Brandon Moore. They print out a picture of Nate Evans and said, yeah, who's talking now after your sorry defense gave up 400 yards and 40 points. They couldn't, a tweet obviously wasn't enough for this person, even though it was free. They had to go through the 50 cents postage to send Nate Evans a piece of paper with all that printed out on them. No return address, by the way. Trying to make Nate Evans and UCF feel bad about losing to LSU. I don't feel bad about losing to LSU at all. It snapped a 25-game win streak, but people know who UCF is. For all the excuses that LSU can make, UCF can make the same number of excuses for that game. It was a weird football game. I think if you play that game 10 times, I wouldn't be surprised if it went 5-5, to be honest with you. It's just on this occasion, UCF missed some opportunities. LSU hit some opportunities, and that's how it works out in games like that. I think the Knights can hold their head high, having gone 12-1 this season, and heading into 2019, feeling pretty good about what they have coming back.
So I will say absolutely with an exclamation mark at the end of that declaration to all of what you just stated. And certainly I left out the most important single factor would be Mackenzie Milton being one of the most polished quarterbacks in the country and one of the most dangerous quarterbacks in the country, not on the field in favor of, as you say, Darryl Mack, who was pressed into action just a few weeks earlier. I saw an LSU team push UCF around, and I thought that was the biggest difference. I thought the lines just leaned on them, and the yardage total is very significant at 555 to 250.
Yeah, I mean, no excuses for UCF, at least on that end. I mean, the defense, particularly in the first half, and this was the thing that we knew was troublesome coming in. LSU does a lot of things that teams that gave UCF fits do. I think back to the game at Memphis, that 31-30 game that UCF squeaked out. Memphis ran the ball all over UCF. I mean, especially in the first half, it was rough at points. But again, you come back to the second half. UCF knows that they are at a size disadvantage with an SEC team like LSU. So what do? You try to go around them, and that's what UCF was would have been able to do had they been able to convert some of those third downs. I think back to the Peach Bowl in the previous year against Auburn. In the second half, UCF was able to convert some of those third downs in key situations because of Mackenzie Milton's mobility. He was able to buy some time and hit guys like Traquan Smith and Gabe Davis downfield for some key first downs when UCF needed it, en route to that victory by 7 points over Auburn. Let's face it, Darryl Mack is just not where Mackenzie Milton was at the end of last year. Like I mentioned, third career start, redshirt freshman, coming off of certainly his best game of the year, but the overall body of work for him was not all that not spectacular. Last year he finished the season 51% passing, 619 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a pick. He ran for 6 touchdowns as well in the course of the year. So one more spring and another summer practice, and who knows what we could get from Darryl Mack. I mean, he certainly showed what the best of his talent could be, especially throwing downfield against Memphis. But again, LSU's defense is different than Memphis, even with up to 8 or 9 guys out, including one of them, by the way, who punched the UCF player in the face while he was wearing his helmet. Not exactly the smartest thing to do, and got ejected for it. So, I mean, it's like I said, if you play that game, I think 10 times, I could certainly see UCF taking advantage of LSU and maybe hitting some of those third downs that were self-inflicted wounds, penalties, drop passes, and the like. I'm not saying it's an excuse, but it is a reason.
I would tend to say, based on what I saw with my eyes, that LSU wins 6 or 7 times, but I'm not accounting for Mackenzie Milton, and that is just
he's the great equalizer. That's
absolutely.
People forget how important he was to UCF this year. It's I'm surprised he finished only 6th in the Heisman balloting, to be honest with you.
And so for that, I'm not going to say that LSU would win 6 or 7 times. I'm good with a 5-5. I'm not going to argue it because I just think, you take out one of the best quarterbacks in the country and you replace him with a guy who, to his credit, he stepped in and performed admirably, but 11 for 30. I know Mackenzie Milton had a rough first half against Auburn, that he stopped that on a dime and torched them in the second half. And I want to be fair and I want to be accurate, because that's what we do here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. When I say UCF got pushed around, I think that was the eye test. I think we all saw that. Todd McShay talked about that from the sideline. But when you think pushed around, you think rushing advantage or disadvantage. LSU only gained 3.1 yards per carry on the ground against UCF. UCF actually was statistically more potent on the ground, surprisingly.
Yeah, what happened in that game was let's not forget, LSU held the ball for 3/4 of the game. They had over, I think they had over 45 minutes time of possession, which is a combination of factors. Number one, they were able to convert third downs and UCF wasn't. That's fairly obvious. And number two, they were able to keep UCF off the field. When UCF was on the field, UCF runs that high tempo, fast paced offense anyway. They averaged barely over 25 minutes of possession per game in the course of the regular season. So, and they were one of the worst teams in FBS in terms of time possession, but holding the ball is not their game. They go fast. That's what they do. That's how they tire out defenses. But part of the way you do that is by converting third downs and moving the football. And because they had those drops, they had those misses on third downs, they weren't able to do that. I think back to that stretch, we actually look back at it in the drive chart for the game. UCF was up 14-3 in that game after the Brandon Moore interception return for 93 yards. But in that drive that LSU had, where they gave up that interception, was something like a 6 or 7 minute drive. And then the drive after that, where they scored a touchdown, which, by the way, they got helped out because there was a penalty that UCF got a sack on a third down that would have forced a punt. But then they called the guy who made the sack. I think it was Eric Gilliard. They called him for spiking the football after the play was over. So that gave LSU a free first down, 15 yards. And then they scored a touchdown a couple plays later to make it 14-10. But those two drives combined, I think, were almost 15 minutes off the clock, right off the bat. And even though UCF scored in between there, the offense wasn't on the field. So that's where I think it did get a little squirrely. It was just, like I said, it was just a weird game. It was one of the weirdest games I think I've ever seen, because you could make the case, just by that eye test, like you were saying, Mark, that, LSU probably could have won the game 42-7, but they only won by one score. So I don't know. Like I said, there's a lot for fans of both schools to scream about on Twitter during the offseason. We know that, and if there's one thing we know, it's that fans of both LSU and UCF love to scream on Twitter a lot.
The incident that you just pointed out with the spiking of the football, those kind of things that drive me crazy, because I'm all for discipline. I'm all for enforcing the rules. So I'm not blaming the officials for that. But I like to see the better team win the game. Not that UCF would have won the game, but man, that just changes the situation completely when you can get off the field, but now your defense is back on the field. You give up the touchdown as opposed to forcing a punt or whatever the field position was. So I just hate that, because I hate those penalties that stop drives that are non-football penalties, playing penalties, just because from an analyst perspective, I want to see the truth be told in the result of who played the better football on the field. I believe that the rule should be enforced and there needs to be discipline enforced, but I hate to see that.
I mean, I get dropping a penalty on somebody for taunting. I mean, that's pretty clear. I get, malicious penalties for, when you're really doing something that I think is universally agreed upon as, I hate using this term because it varies in definition, but unsportsmanlike. But spiking the football, come on now. Now, I know it's on the books that you can't spike the football. I get that. I'm not blaming the officials for making that call. And I'm also not blaming that call for the reason why UCF lost the game. What I am saying is that rule is ridiculous. And I think that the competition committee, when they get the chance to, they should really look at readjusting that rule, because it is also an emotional game played by 18 to 22-year-olds before 75, 80, 100,000 people. You mean to tell me that they're supposed to act like Benedictine monks out there?
And why not this, Jeff? We don't want kids spiking the ball after every play. So if
I get that.
If we didn't have any rule, then it wouldn't happen. But a kid could spike the ball every play. But why not a warning? Why not we build up a warning, 2 warnings, and then, okay, this is ridiculous. You've spiked the ball 3 times. Your team has penalty.
Right. Or in cases of that, why do we not trust coaches to discipline their own kids? Right. You know, why do the officials have to step in and make that call? But obviously, you know, putting aside the fact that it's on the books, right? But why doesn't college football trust coaches to pull the kid aside and say, "Hey, son, we don't do that around here. You score a touchdown, fine, spike the ball, but not after you get, say, you know, the thing that they complain about in the NFL all the time, which is, you know, you get a first down, you're down 31 points, and you get a first down in garbage time, and you're spiking the football because you got a first down. Come on, what are you doing?" It's something that, you know, like I said, I don't. In this day and age, with so much riding on college football these days, and so much, you know, cultural investment in it, to ask these kids, you know, to to walk around on the field like I said, like they're Benedictine monks, when you know, when they got 80,000, 100,000 people, you know, cheering their name after whatever play, is just not realistic. You know, I'm sorry. The fans can freak out. The people. By the way, if you're on the sideline, you can spike all the footballs you want, but once you step across that white line, you know, now you have to act like there's a funeral. I don't get it.
Good stuff from Jeff Sharon. You can catch more of him and the rest of the staff there at SB Nation's Black and Gold Banneret. UCF football and the rest of the athletic programs are represented right there. Right, Jeff, we appreciate you stopping by, giving us some clarity and insight into the Brandon Wimbush edition.
All right, Mark, it's always good to talk to you. Hope you're staying warm with the weather coming around over the next week here with this winter storm happening. So take it easy. I'll talk to you soon, all right?
All right,
Listen, if you want to come down to Florida, you know, it's 72 degrees and sunny right now. So,
well, I believe I've got potential of 2 different trips in the next roughly 6 to 8 weeks. One headed your way, one maybe a little bit further west. So it could be a good time.
Come on down. We'll show you around.
Thanks, Jeff. We appreciate it.
All right, Mark.